Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're hanging out with Yawen Ju, who's she works with CGTN Radio. I really enjoy working with her. Been working with her for a few years now, and we've got some great discussion that we're going to have about the U.S.-China trade talks in Sweden and a little bit more. Let's talk. All right, 1 second here. I've got to make it a
Garland, I think you have to unmute your microphone. I cannot hear you. You have to unmute your microphone.
All right, can you hear me now?
Great.
Okay, yeah, I just had a little glitch. I had to re-add my microphone. All right, let's get going.
Sure.
There we go. I'm unmuted. Everything. Hear me good? You can hear me fine?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got another. Let me change this. Sorry about that. I had 1 second. I still have to change my settings here. All righty. Now try. Can you say something? Yawen?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
This is Yawen.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, can you hear me? You can hear me too?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
I can hear you perfectly.
My settings went crazy and I readjusted them, but now we're ready to go. All right, let's start here. President Trump's representatives spoke with the representatives of the Chinese government about U.S. trade issues, U.S.-China trade issues in Sweden recently. People know the history of of what happened with the trade war and all this kind of stuff. And I think all of us, Americans and Chinese people both, were hoping that this could get resolved amicably because it affects the everyday working class person's ability to live, buy the things they need. And of course, there are a lot of people in the United States whose businesses are based on buying Chinese product and reselling them, using them for various things. So this needed to be done for the everyday person. If you could, can you give us the overview and the key takeaways of the trade talks in Sweden?
Yes, of course. First of all, Garland, it's a pleasure to join you again. We know the latest round of trade talks between China and the U.S. Concluded in Stockholm on Tuesday, and it was the third meeting of this kind since May, and the previous two were held in Geneva and London. And this meeting was led by Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng and U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. And the goal was to stabilize their bilateral trade relations and ease tensions, because we know after the closed-door talks, no joint statement was issued. And what we have learned is that the main issue of discussion was whether to extend the current tariff suspension period by another 90 days. So following the meeting, from the Chinese side, Mr. Li Chenggang, China's international trade representative, and also the Vice Minister of Commerce, told the media that China and the U.S. had an open and candid discussion about each other's key economic and trade concerns. And both sides agreed that they will continue to extend the 24% tariffs that the U.S. had temporarily suspended, as well as China's countermeasures as planned. So I think this gives the two countries more time to negotiate and resolve their differences. It also means the new tariff delay will last until November 10th. Which will allow for further talks on deeper issues such as U.S. technology export controls. And another positive development I want to bring up, which comes the second day after China and U.S. bilateral trade talk, is when Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with a delegation from the U.S. China Business Council, USCBC. So the group included business leaders from top American companies like from Boeing, from Goldman Sachs, and also from Thermo Fisher Scientific. So during the meeting, Commerce Minister Wang Wentao, he said that decoupling and breaking the supply chain will not work, and equal dialogue and consultation are the key to resolving differences. He said that it's hoped the US will work in the same direction with China to maintain this stable, healthy, and sustainable development of China US economic and trade relations. Also, Foreign Minister Wang Yi sent a message as well. He expressed the hope that the US business community in China would help promote a correct understanding of China and also foster friendship between the two peoples and lead a mutually beneficial cooperation. Mr. Wang Yi, he also noted that China is willing to strengthen engagement with America, avoid misjudgments, manage differences, and explore new areas of cooperation. So the U.S. executives from the U.S. side, the U.S. business leaders, they reaffirmed their commitment to the Chinese market and planning to expand cooperation in areas like trade, investment, the technological innovation, and actively participate in China's high quality development. And lastly, before I wrap up my points, I think it's worth noting that the latest economic data shows that China has demonstrated resilience under the current external trade pressure. We know China achieved its 5.3% growth rate in the first half of this year, surpassing expectations. In the meantime, the US economy slowed in the first half of 2025 as tariffs began to weigh more heavily on consumer prices and business investments. So I think this contrast highlights how tariffs are impacting the world's two largest economies differently.
Yeah, and I'll just make a comment. I think what Americans need to understand that, in the opinion of a lot of economists, a tariff is essentially a tax on the American people, because the way a tariff is paid when the product comes in. As an example, if I'm a businessman in America and I'm buying $100,000 worth of equipment, when it comes in, I pay the tariff. I have to pay. If
Exactly.
it's a 20% tariff, I have to pay 120,000. And we're talking about 100%, that means 200,000. That means now that I pay this additional, let's say I've got a 25% profit margin. I now only have a 5% profit margin. And I have to figure out, how am I going to make that up? Well, I have to either fire employees or get rid of employees or lower the cost of my labor, because I can't lower the cost of my warehouse space. I got to pay the same amount of my gas or electricity or fuel or insurance. I have to pay. The only two places I can get that from: labor or raising the cost. I can fire people. I can lower the amount that I'm paying my labor, or I can raise the cost to my consumer. And most of the time, it's going to be some combination of. They're going to have to fire people. They're going to have to. So the American people get hurt. The tariffs, though they're said to be a tariff on China or other countries, they have the most pronounced effect on the American people. Now, let's continue. Your thoughts, just real quick. Oh, go ahead. You had a statement. Go ahead.
I think that's a very good point. I think a lot of I saw videos online, like people doing random street interviews asking who will hurt most from the U.S. tariffs policy, and most of the people who accept the interview do not understand it's the American consumers who will pay for the higher costs of the goods they purchase on a daily basis. And as you just mentioned, Garland, there are two ways to maintain the business, operate the business. Either reduce the benefit of your employees, or to raise the costs, to increase the price for consumers. So either way, they're either lose more job opportunities, or it will carry on move the burden on consumers. So that's a very, very important message for, I think, a lot more people need to know about.
Well, there's another factor too, and and because I think it's important to emphasize the negative factors, the negative consequences of these tariffs on the working class people. And that is ultimately, let's say Brazil or the or China or any country, the US says, we're going to put a bunch of tariffs on you. This is a offensive move. The people who are in charge of the country then they have to look at it this way. Well, there are negative consequences for our companies or whatever we're selling, to the United States. They have to then look at where can we sell that stuff. They have to look at other countries to do trade with. So if China or Brazil buys pork or something from the United States, okay, if they now have to sell with something to other countries, they have to give that other country a benefit. So now they're going to say to whatever country, let's say they say to, I'm just going to throw the name out of there, Vietnam, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
sell you more stuff. Well, they have to buy something from the Vietnamese. So we'll buy more pork. So my point being, whenever a country that is tariffed has to start doing business with other countries, they will then stop buying as many things from the United States and start
Mm-hmm.
purchasing things from other countries too. Basically, China or Brazil or India move their trade overall from the US to whatever other country they're dealing with. So now the people in the United States who sell pork or soybeans or whatever it is they sell to China, they're also going to be losing out because China or India or Brazil is going to have to direct their trade to the other countries. And so the
Mm-hmm.
consumer hurts because the consumer pays more for the product. The consumer hurts because they lose their jobs, they get laid off, they use benefits. The people here who are farmers, etc., get hurt because the stuff that they were selling to China and Brazil and India, China, Brazil, and India now have to purchase that elsewhere in order to do trade. So everyone gets hurt. One of the things we're seeing, the people who sell soybeans and pork and other things now, they're starting to say, well, wait a minute, why are we losing our business? We're losing our business because these other countries have to focus their trade elsewhere because the US is unstable as a trading partner. And I think that's important to understand.
Yeah, that's very good point. What you have just described remind me of, when I look at the map, when there is the conflict, regional conflict going on, the airplanes, they will avoid flying above the airspace of the conflict zone. That's what will happen if the tariff, in the US tariff policy targeting its allies or its trade partners or China. The worst case scenario would be the US is it will isolate itself in this global trade system, just like people will avoiding the conflict, the airspace of the conflict zone.
That's a good point. That's the word I think I was looking for: isolation. That's the whole term,
Yes.
that we isolate ourselves economically. Because when we talk about tariffs, people forget the word that we're really talking about is trade. We sell things to India, China, Brazil. We buy things from China, India, Brazil. And if we're tariffing them, and if we're taking actions that make it more difficult for them to sell things for us, our overall trade will be affected. It means it's more difficult for them to buy things for us, and they have to direct all of their trade if they see an unstable trading partner. The term that Americans don't understand, that my study of Russia and China particularly, and I was with Russian media I've worked with Russian media for years, and the understanding that I started to get, the word that Americans don't understand is this word: stability. What does
Yes.
Russia and China want? There are three world powers, really. India is semi-world power, aspiring world power. But the three major world powers are the United States, Russia, and China. They're on one level, everyone else is on a different level. And my point is, if you are a world power, the most important thing you need, whether it's economics, military, diplomacy, stability. You need to know, I'm planning for the people of my country to be able to get food, to bring in energy, all of these trade things that we need. And if you're the leader of the country, you have to be able to say, we've got to deal with Russia for this amount of energy, and it's going to work for 5 years. We've got to with this country for soybeans for 5 years, for this, so that when you plan how you're going to do things, you have a stable plan for the next however many years. When
Yes.
every 3, 4, 5 months, we've got tariffs that are 100%, tariffs that are 20%, tariffs that are 50%, tariffs that are changing. Oh, we may tariff you, threats of tariffs. You don't have stability. And to me, if I'm the Chinese government or the Russian government, I would rather go with a country where the deal is not quite as good. Maybe the deal isn't as good. Maybe but I can have a stable trade deal for the next 10 years. I would take a deal that wasn't as good for me, that maybe it was a little more costly, if I could get a 5-year stable deal, because then I can plan how I'm going to run my country. And that's what America's, the volatility and instability that the US has been creating, is creating a dynamic where countries are saying, this is unstable. I have to find someone that's stable. And I think that's what a lot of Americans don't understand. That's the dynamic that's starting to really create a bad situation in the long term for the American people.
Garland, I just want to add my very quick of what you have just inspired me. I think one of the reasons why China become so like China's development, China's modernization goes this far. One of the major reasons is because China have this 5-year plan, like the CPC, the Communist Party of China. They have this different plenary session, and actually in October this year, the 4th plenary session of the 20th CPC Central Committee will have roll out the next 5 years plan for the country's development in terms of economic, in terms of social welfare, in terms of like all aspects of the country. And because China have this 5-year plan, and then a conduct based on this plan, make investors both domestically and internationally understand where the country is heading, and so that they can decide where they want to put their money in, where to invest. For instance, the green economy means senior people, they're going to, by, if I'm not remembering wrong, by 2030 or by 2035, nearly 1/3 of Chinese population will be the age of 60 or older. So that's the blue economy of these countries. So you can see it's booming in this industry nowadays. Either people are opening senior care centers, or they're investing in healthcare specifically for senior people, or all kinds of classes targeted design specifically for seniors. So that's just how the country is being managed to grow to this influential nowadays. So as you said, stability is the major reason for investors or for trade partners to put their money in, to do their trade.
Yeah, that's it. I always, being a person who analyzes politics, international politics, that's the term that I try to drive home, that I try to get people to understand. Whenever you're looking at international politics, understand that what competent leaders want and what they push for is stability, predictability, right? And instability breeds economic disaster. That's how I'll put it this way. Okay, let's continue. Something else I think is important.
Yeah, sure.
There has been some changes. The U.S. has ended tariff exemptions, for low value packages. What do you think the commerce and consumer impact for these ending these exemptions? First of all, when they say for low value packages, what does that mean? And then what's the effect?
Sure. So, I'm glad you brought this up, because the low value packages means packages is value is estimated around $800,
Okay.
and so the U.S. government has decided to terminate the $800 de minimis tariffs exemption for these low value packages. That will take effect by the end of August this year, and that will be a significant shift in global e-commerce dynamics because not only the Chinese e-commerce giant that's operating in the U.S. market will be affected, but also the American households, especially from lower or middle income families, will be influenced the most, as well as small businesses. I will explain why. So under this policy, let's talk about China's how it will affect China's e-commerce companies. So commercial shipments under this policy via private carriers will face tariffs, with postal shipments will be subject to either value-based duties of or flat fees of around $80 to $200 per item. And this is a dramatic change that threatens the low cost business model that China's e-commerce giants have built on duty-free small parcels. So these platforms, for instance, Tmall or Shen or AliExpress, you probably are you using those platforms as well? Because
I have
I did
friends
when I
and
was in
family
America.
members. I have friends and family members,
Yeah,
particularly Timu and
you're
Shein a
using it.
lot.
Yeah. So that means now, under this policy, these platforms will face difficult choices between absorbing substantial costs that could erode profit margins, raising prices and risking their competitive advantages, or fundamentally restructuring their supply chain through measures like establishing US fulfillment centers, which Shen it has recently leased a massive Indiana warehouse, and also Timo is talking about to do so, like to rent similar facilities in New Jersey and in California. And now we talk about the impact on Chinese e-commerce giants. Let's look at how this policy will affect the U.S. consumers and small businesses. So this it will increase immediate challenges for American consumers who can expect price increases of around 20 to 50% on many everyday items. Like they before probably you can purchase, especially for fashion items, like many girls they would love to purchase the nail necessities. They can do their nails at home, but now the price will be increased. And also like there will be less options in the future because some Chinese businesses, like small businesses who join are doing this selling to American market, they cannot afford the high cost that they will reduce their business to the market, which means for American consumers they have less options. For US small businesses, so the effect will be mixed. While some may benefit from it because there will be less competition in the domestic market, right? And there could be potential opportunities in domestic manufacturing, but others that rely on Chinese suppliers will face higher costs and supply chain disruptions. So the stock market has already reacted to these changes. For instance, Pinduoduo, this is a parent company, Tmall's parent company, shares dropping 5%, while the U.S. logistics and warehousing stocks have increased. So I think this policy represents another significant step in ongoing economic decoupling or economic tensions between U.S. and China, following the similar moves we have witnessed in semiconductors and clean energy sectors. And it will ultimately accelerate China's e-commerce platforms' efforts to develop local for local globalization strategies. So in the short term, we will see market turbulence and price fluctuations as companies and consumers adjust. While in the midterm to long term, we will see a fundamental restructuring of global e-commerce logistics and a rebalancing of US-China trade patterns. So I think eventually the impact will depend on how effectively Chinese platforms can adapt their business models and whether American consumers will accept these higher prices for their daily goods, and that they have already got used to purchasing them at a very reasonable price through these platforms. Yeah.
Additionally, there are a number of things going on. Number one, the president saying, "Oh, I'm going to do 100% tariffs on anyone who buys Russian oil." Silliness. I doubt if he does that. If he did, I mean, that could wreck global trade. But wreck the U.S. economy. What he's saying is, if you don't give me what I want, I'll destroy the U.S. economy. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But the president's increasing tariffs on South Korea, on Brazil. There was 15 or 50%, but now at the last minute he changed and he said, this is going to be the percent. We don't know if that's going to change. By the time I'm saying this, that could have changed again. But what we know is South Korea, which is supposed to be a U.S. ally, they're getting significant tariffs. Brazil, even Japan, etc. How do you think that's going to affect global trade, these additional tariffs on very important and significant industrial powers?
Well, I think first of all, this is the sideline discussion that I have noticed that many people were talking about. Oh, what if the U.S. impose sanctions on China and or other countries who are purchasing oil from Russia or Iran? Like, how China responds? I think there are a few things to be pointed out. First of all, from China's perspective, I think China has the sovereign right to choose its trade partner. It's not the decision of America to say who we can do trade with or who we cannot. And under the international law, the UN Charter and WTO rules, every country has the right to engage in trade with any nation it chooses. And US cannot just simply unilaterally dictate China's energy policy. So China imports over 70% of its oil, and Russia and Iran offer competitive prices. So why not? It's just the nature of trade. They can provide, we can purchase. And secondly, the U.S. secondary sanctions violate the global trade rules. So it can it has imposed the sanctions on other countries who have different stance with the U.S. Policy, but that's just simply violating the international trade law. And also, such sanctions disrupt the supply chains as well and worsen the inflation, could harming businesses worldwide, and also that could include American companies. And another thing I want to say is very hypocritical to see that the US are saying this because America itself still buys oil from Russia. Like, even though they officially banning Russian oil, but the US imports its oil, like they purchase Russian oil from India and other like third countries. It's very interesting. Like, we don't talk about it, we don't know about it. And so if the US sanctions China, it could I would say hurt its own sector. For instance, we're still talking about the rare earth trade. We're not using it. China is now using it as the bargaining chip, but we're doing it based on our own resources and environmental concern. But we also have the right to say who we want to do businesses with in terms of selling the rare earth product. And last but not least, so China has countermeasures and is not what it is like decades ago. China today is, even though it's still developing countries, but it has, due to its economic size and this other capacity, if the U.S. want to, sanction China due to whoever China is doing business with, China will not be feared of that. And China is not only doing it to protect its own trade sovereignty, but also is setting an example to the world, especially to other developing countries and countries in the global south, that we should not be afeared of hegemonic power, and we should do the right things, but not like choose not to do certain things because of certain countries' economic coercion.
Well, thank you very much, Yawen. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy, and I know it's at nighttime there. It's 9:30 p.m. Where you are. So I thank you very much, and I've learned a lot. I think it was a great discussion, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Well, thank you, Garland, for having me. It's a
And
pleasure joining you.
Where can people find you online? Where if they want to watch see your work, or is there any place they can follow you or find your work online?
Yeah, sure. I'm available on Twitter and YouTube. And on Twitter, you can search me as Yawen Xu 17. Yeah, you
All
can
right.
find me there.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Likewise.
All right, everyone. Don't forget, follow me on Telegram and follow me on Rockfin and all that kind of stuff. And certainly, if you can become a Patreon member or buy me a coffee member, whatever the case, that's great. But the most important thing that you can do is share this video on all your social media platforms. Thank you very much. We're out.